Hello and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I am Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
Adam will not be joining us for this episode, but today we are reviewing the brand new movie from Richard Linklater, currently on Netflix, which is Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood.
Yeah, and this movie kind of came out of nowhere. I feel like there weren't very many ads for it, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, this drops on Netflix this week, a new animated Linklater movie. And I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and people familiar with the podcast, the show, Richard Linklater is my favorite director. I've got, I think before this movie, I've got like either 7 or 8 of his movies at like a 4.5 or higher.
You want to run down what some of those are, just in case the name isn't ringing?
Yeah, if the name sounds familiar, even or if you just don't know what else he's done, Linklater has given us Dazed and Confused, probably his most famous movie, and Everybody Wants Some. Both are very similar. The Before trilogy with Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. He's also done School of Rock and Boyhood.
Classic.
Yep. And he's done a few other movies here and there. Slacker is another one that was his first movie that I loved. So a lot of Linklater love from me specifically, but I think Dylan's also a pretty big fan.
Yeah. I like the style.
I heard about this movie. I heard that it was debuting at South by Southwest in Austin at the film festival in what I want to say like mid-March. And so I knew he had this movie coming out at some point this year, but there was no announcement that I saw that it got picked up by Netflix, that it was going to be quick. And then there was just like beginning of April, I went in to see what's new on Netflix in April, and it was like the 3rd movie listed by this article I was reading. And I thought it was a lie. It was April 1st. I thought somebody was messing with me, but then I did remember that most people aren't as hyped about this movie as I am. Yeah, so it'd be a weird April Fool's joke because there's, it like you said, like nobody even really knew that this was a thing. And it was surprising though. And I was really excited once I learned that it was coming out.
Yeah. And before I tell them what it's about, should we get to all that jazz? I hear some trumpets and some piano playing in the background.
Yeah, I wish. Forget about this pretty much every time, but if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the bell to make sure you get updates. If you're listening to this on a podcast, please follow us, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps the channel grow, and we really appreciate it.
We do indeed. So Apollo 10.5, as mentioned, written and directed by Richard Linklater. A coming-of-age story set in the suburbs of Houston, Texas, in the summer of 1969, centered around the historic Apollo 11 moon landing.
All right, and we can dive right in, as always, with what works.
Yeah, so I think the first thing...
I'm proud of myself for just remembering to do that, because Adam runs the controls around here, and he's not with us with this episode, so I was a little worried that I was going to forget some of this stuff, but so far so good.
Nice. Yeah, I guess for what works, I figured the best place to start would be the animation, which is definitely done like rotoscope style. If you've seen like A Scanner Darkly from like the mid 2000s, or
also a Linklater movie, by the way.
Also a Linklater film. What's another rotoscope movie that people might?
Waking Life, which is another Linklater movie. There are rotoscoping elements in like that Ralph Bakshi version of Lord of the Rings from like 1980 or something like that.
Okay,
but it's not the whole movie. It's not something you see a lot, really.
Yeah, it's very unique. Is that, if I'm correct, is that it involves drawing like over frames of, like they film it and then they have the artists like draw over the frames, basically?
Yeah, so they film it
realistic movement.
Yeah, and they film it with like live with real actors, and then they draw over it.
So I felt like visually this movie was very enjoyable. To give you an idea of the style, I'll tip my head over here. That's our...
For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you get a little
that's our main
visual
character
aid here, thanks to Dylan.
hmm But yeah, very colorful, and it's just a interesting, like, fun setting. It puts you in the shoes of basically, yeah, a kid growing up in the shadow of NASA in 1969, leading up to the space race, and just kind of the hype and the exhilaration, and just the belief that like the future is going to be amazing, and how that
Yeah.
was just, it just permeated to all the kids in the neighborhood and everything. It was just so optimistic, and this movie combined with the art style and just the writing and everything really puts you right there and gives you an idea of what that was like. So I think that's definitely one of the stronger parts of this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the animation a lot. It was also a little cleaner than you usually see rotoscoping. Like if you have seen A Scanner Darkly or Waking Life, it's a little more like shaky or it, like
hmm
surrealist almost, where it doesn't feel as real.
Yeah.
And this was cleaner and it felt very real. I thought I like the animation style quite a bit. And then one thing that really worked for me, and I can see this not working for everybody,
hmm
is I guess I'll get into that in a second because that might lead
Okay.
into what might not work. And so that can be kind of a bridge there. But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I just loved the family dynamic here.
Mm.
I mean, this recreated an era as well as anything I've seen in a really long time. I felt so immersed in like 1969, late 60s
hmm
Houston. It just felt so real. And this is a short movie, but I really felt like with the family dynamics and like I thought the parents, particularly the dad, were hilarious.
Yeah. A lot of good
There's a
comedy.
little bit of like Gene Shepherd Christmas Story element to
hmm
this with Jack Black as an adult version of the main character narrating everything and kind of providing that like wisdom of an adult looking back. So you
hmm
do get some commentary that becomes funny when it's like an adult observing something foolish or ridiculous that kids are doing, or maybe realizing like something that their parents did that they thought was normal when they were 10 is
Yeah.
actually kind of strange. Um, I,
Yeah. And then
I liked all that a lot.
I like that too. The Jack Black was a great choice to narrate this, and just
Mhm.
for the voice. His comedic delivery is always great. And I guess I didn't know going in that it was going to be a voiceover narration for almost the whole movie. It's not just at the beginning. It follows through. And yeah, I mean, I think the stronger parts of this are definitely like having to do with the family. Like you really get to learn a lot about each member. It's a big family. There's like what, 5, 6 kids.
There's 6 or 7
So,
kids.
yeah, and so it's a big family, but you get to know each one of them, and you get a lot of fun interfamily humor. And I love the scene when uh, someone rats out the boys for having like an adult magazine, and the dad
Oh
just walks
yeah,
in, doesn't say a word, just goes and grabs it and walks right back out. Like,
yeah.
there's a lot of
There's
good
so much
stuff like
funny stuff
that.
with the dad. Like
Yeah,
I love a moment when they just like kind of steal a plank of wood from a nearby construction site.
yeah,
And
yeah,
with the narration from Jack Black saying, like, we couldn't really tell if our dad was like really strapped for cash or if he was just kind of a con man. And like the dad's just like so proud of himself in some of these little silly moments that I just thought it was really funny. And that's kind of a recurring joke
hmm
as the movie goes. So I like that quite a bit. And yeah, back to your point about the movie being a little different than what you'd expect, where
hmm
it feels like, because the way the movie starts is he's about to be recruited to join NASA
Yep,
because, oops, they designed the space shuttle too small for an adult to fit in.
classic.
So they need a kid with good presidential fitness scores
hmm
and good science test scores. And
Yep,
that's our main character to a T.
yep,
And so he gets recruited to go to the moon first, actually, and test everything out before they send up Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin.
yeah.
And the way that they start you get into that for like 5 minutes, and then he says, like, okay, to give you a quick idea of what life was like then, that you hear from
Yeah.
Jack Black. And it feels like it's going to be about a 5 to 10 minute, like, kind of summary of just like what was big at the time and what life was like. But then it just keeps going. And that's basically the whole movie. And it is
Yeah.
interesting where I didn't really know that going in. So I was kind of waiting for that part to end.
Yeah.
but I really enjoyed it. And once I realized that, like, oh, this is the main point of the movie, is Jack
Mhm.
Black voicing the main character and looking back on his childhood. The movie's about memory, really.
Yeah, it's a trip down
And
memory lane. The space thing is just a excuse, kind of, a one marker in his life where he's able to
right.
tie this moment in time to that event.
Yeah, and I think that worked really well, but I can see people kind of getting thrown off by that and maybe not being down for like 90 to 80 minutes of Jack Black just kind of talking over a bunch of kids doing things. I
Yeah.
personally loved it, but I can see where that would bother somebody, or they'd get like 15 minutes in and think like, I don't know if I can handle another
Yeah.
hour plus of just this.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm not going to throw that for me into something that doesn't work, but as sort of a just letting people know what to expect going into this movie.
Well, should we transition then to what doesn't work? That's kind of a good
Yeah, we might as
transition
well.
point.
What angered Paddington in our picture here?
Well, I think you kind of alluded to it. You beat me to the punch a little bit. I enjoyed that it was so nostalgic, and I had a good time, and there was a lot of good jokes, but I did feel like it was plotless to a point that left it a little unsatisfying for me. Like
Okay,
when it finally did end, I kind of like, oh, okay, so that was kind of what the point of this movie was, but I wanted a little more payoff with an actual plot, and it was just hard because it's kind of going back and forth between the family stuff and then kind of this fantastical, like, he's been recruited and he's training for NASA. And I guess as that went on, like, the third act and like the climax of that just felt a little, I don't know, it just felt a little empty to me. And then it was like credits time, and I was like, oh, okay. So I mean, that kind of didn't work for me. And I found myself thinking a lot about Licorice Pizza when I was watching this,
totally
where it's like
fair.
Licorice Pizza creates that whole vibe and these kids that you're running around with, but there's also a very strong kind of love story, coming of age plot that's driven in each scene. And
Yep.
this kind of felt like Licorice Pizza, but if there was no love story and we just hung out with Gary Valentine for an hour and a half, or
I can see that.
or to compare it to another Linklater film, this kind of felt like Dazed and Confused, but if there was no big party at the end and he didn't even get invited and it was just in his head thinking about what that party would have been like. Like, I don't know. Like, um, so I still enjoyed it, but that it did feel a little just like it didn't have a strong base of a plot that I was actually driving everything that kind of kept me interested. So that, I guess that would be a what doesn't work for me, and maybe that's just because I didn't really know to expect
Could
kind
be.
of what it was. So if I did see it again, going in knowing, okay, it's really just a super nostalgic, like, Linklater fondly remembering his childhood and sharing that with us, maybe I'll come at it and kind of appreciate it for more. But yeah, when it ended, I was just like, oh, okay. So I don't know. That was a kind of a weak point for me.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with you a little bit on that, but I can see where you're coming from.
Hmm.
I loved almost every second of this movie, and
Okay.
I think for me, once I realized that, like, I really like his decision to weave in the clearly fantasy inspired element of like so many kids' dreams, especially a kid growing up in the 60s in Houston, to
Yeah.
like be involved with something that NASA is doing, where that is clearly fake.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
nobody's ever pretending that it isn't. And when we're watching it, we know that it's fake because it's ridiculous. That would never happen.
Yeah.
But the way that he weaves those in and the narrator treats it the same as everything else, that's what elevates this movie for me, because it's sort of Linklater's way of saying, like, this fantasy or this dream that I had is just as real as my memories are now, because these are probably all wrong too.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
that's
Yeah.
kind of what I took out of that. With like, there's a line toward the end of the movie about like, oh, even if he didn't see that, like in years, he'll convince
Imagine
himself
that he
that he
did.
really did. Like that's how memory works.
Yeah.
And I like the way that that wrapped everything up and kind of made it about like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to recreate everything exactly the way it was, because that's impossible. And we don't remember things as well as we think. But what I can recreate is that feeling that I had of feeling like the future was here now and it was just limitless. And I think this movie does a very good job of accomplishing that.
Fair enough. All right. Should we move on to the performances?
Yeah. Kind of performances are a little bit different with an animated movie, obviously, but I did get a kick out of having Glenn Powell and Zachary Levi
Yeah.
as the two NASA guys that recruit what's his name, Stan, the main
Stan.
character, to NASA. I thought that was really fun. And if you don't know who they are, Glenn Powell was also in Everybody Wants Some. And he was in Hidden Figures, and Set It Up is a romantic comedy with Zooey Deschanel on Netflix right now, I believe.
Nice.
So you'd probably recognize his face,
Yeah.
I would think. And then Zachary Levi is actually, I believe he was the guy that played Shazam.
Yes, he did. And you would definitely recognize his face. Very memorable. I think
Season 2 of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, if you've seen that.
Yeah, I think he was on TV and like on some NBC shows back in the 2000s. So he's been coming up for a while. But yeah, I like that duo was a nice kind of adult comedic duo as like the NASA, I guess what would you like mission control guys.
Yeah, and because it's rotoscoped, they look like themselves.
Yeah.
So even though it's animated, it's not just me picking out like voice acting. Like it's all filmed real with all these people and then just drawn over. So it just right away I recognized Glenn Powell and Zachary Levi. I was like the whole time I was just like, God, I know who that guy is.
Yeah, I wanted to just give a shout out. You mentioned the dad, voiced by Bill Wise.
Okay,
I thought that was fantastic. I don't know off the top of my head anything else that Bill Wise has been in, but I just felt like
Waves.
Oh, okay, yeah, I thought like he nailed it. Also, Lee Eddy.
Sure.
Lee Eddy is the mom. Both the mom and the dad are great, and all the siblings are great too. I mean, it's hard, like I said, they got like 7 kids, but
and Jack Black's narration I thought was really good too.
Yeah, I think Jack Black is the real standout here. Like, I think honestly, if you would have told me like, oh, it's narrated by Jack Black and a lot of the movie is narrated, so you get a lot of Jack Black narration, I maybe would have been a little hesitant, but it was perfect. His voice is like this perfect pitch that's like lighthearted and like almost sounds like juvenile still, even though he's an adult.
Yeah,
so I know what you mean. Really well when he's kind of laughing along with his old self, or when he's like you mentioned, kind of bring an adult perspective to it. Like they're both, it works really well.
Yeah, and I was actually a little worried like 15 minutes in, just because Jack Black is so like, he's just Jack Black and like everything, he's rarely somebody else.
Yeah.
And I was just a little worried that I wasn't going to be able to fully believe that Jack Black was this kid early on in the movie. And then, but as it went along, you're right. He hit all the beats so well. Every emotion that he had, like that you could hear in his voice when he was talking about something, was just the right amount of whatever he needed it to be.
Yeah. So that was a good time.
Then we want to get into who is this for?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I already mentioned, if you liked Licorice Pizza, if you liked Dazed and Confused, if you like just kind of the hangout vibe movies where it's like a group of kids or just a group of people and you get to know them, and it's more driven by them and their connections to each other and their relationships than necessarily like this happens and then this happens. If you can dig those types of movies, I think you'll like this a lot. And maybe going into it knowing what we've told you, where to expect a lot of narration and a lot of nostalgia, and that's kind of the point of the movie. I mean, I think if you're into those types of movies, you're going to like this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I will say, I think people like our parents' age will love this thing if this is even like remotely up their alley stylistically. I finished watching it and just immediately texted my dad and said, you have to watch this movie. Like, I guarantee you're going to love it. He was the same age as this kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was also the same age as Gary Valentine in the same year. So I was just like, God, you're having a lot of movies come out recently about like kids exactly the same age you were.
Yeah. Your era.
Yeah, for sure. And which I think is cool. And that's not to say that I think this is only for, people
No.
in their older than 50 or anything like that. I loved this movie.
Mhm.
I just liked spending time with the family. I thought it was sweet and funny. And honestly, I could have watched like 100 episodes of like a sitcom
Yeah,
about
I mean,
this family.
I kind of agree. Like, I would have hung out with the family more, and I guess I would have happily watched something with this family going through a very like real
Sure.
instigating event, as
Mhm.
opposed to mostly the side story that we know from the beginning is fantastical, which
And then just
yeah.
kind of watching them hang out and live their regular lives for the rest of it.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. Like if they would have been like, "Oh, this family moves from Cape Canaveral to New York." Like I'd watch a fun hour-long thing about that. There's some fun characters and yeah,
Yeah.
they're a lovable family. But yeah. And also I would say too, if you're a big sci-fi person and maybe you got sucked in by the trailer on Netflix or whatever, I mean, it's not really like a sci-fi adventure movie at all. So don't
No, it's
go
not.
in. It's not. It's
But
definitely
I
it's about
personally
the
enjoy
family.
kind of living in the space race era.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like kind of just that feeling, that's kind of what the movie's about, of just like, God, this is cool. And like everybody's paying attention to it.
Yeah, maybe even like if maybe you're not, whether you're a sci-fi person or not, but if you're a big like history person, if you
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
like
that's
movies that,
more what this would be. Like if you really like Hidden Figures or like October Sky,
yeah, there you go.
I
Hmm.
think those two movies fit really well with this as well. Or Apollo 13.
Oh man, Hidden Figures and October Sky and this would be like a great little weekend
Yeah.
of space wonderment.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah. Totally agree with that.
all right, should we get to the stars?
Yeah. We will be back in a second.
All right.
Okay. So again, if you're new to the show, we do a 5-star scale, 1 star being horrible and 5 stars being a masterpiece, with 3 right in the middle as your typical solid, gets the
Good.
job done kind of movie.
Yeah.
So you want to go first?
I will go first. It sounds like I maybe didn't love this quite as much as you did, but I still had a good time. I'm going to give this a solid, good 3 out of 5. Um, the nostalgia was fun. All the little details were fun, and even though I felt like in the middle, I'm like, are we losing track of what the plot is, or like we're spending a lot of
Yeah.
time just like going over like the shows we watched and the baseball cards I had and the
Hmm.
like, and remember this one time that we all did this like, but there was a smile on my face pretty much the entire movie,
That's a
and
really good way to put it, because I experienced that too. I was just grinning like the
yeah.
whole way through.
Like and I think we've mentioned before on this podcast how we've entered this era of directors making movies that are kind of love letters to where they grew up or an era that they love or a place that they love. This is clearly Linklater's version of that, and I didn't find it overly self-indulgent or like some of the other ones. I thought it was really good and sweet and heartfelt, and it's more just about his family, and just like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the review, just the whole atmosphere and the feeling that the future was going to be this bright, amazing, fantastical, like we're already going to the moon, like in 10 years we'll be
Yeah.
living on the moon, and in 20 years we'll be like, oh, anything is possible. And being a kid in that specific time period must have just been truly, I mean, magical, because your
Yeah.
imagination is just like, yeah, literally like anything I can think of will probably happen in my lifetime, like so. And it gave me that feeling. So like I mentioned, I would have appreciated a little the emotional punch or just connection wasn't really there, just as far as plot wise what actually happens, but I still had a great
Sure.
time. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5, and recommend if you like Linklater movies or just good vibes movies. So
What's
give it a
that
3.
John Mulaney line? When he was a kid, he thought he'd be drinking moon juice with President Jonathan Taylor Thomas when he was like 30.
Yep. That's a great line.
Yeah, just made me think of that when you were talking about like might be living on the moon.
Yep.
I did almost forget to get your stars up there on the screen for
Nice.
everybody on YouTube to see. That's
Okay, good.
yeah. Like I said,
Mhm.
without Adam here, we're flying blind just a little bit with
Mhm.
the YouTube controls.
Making it
Um,
work.
yeah. I'll put mine up on time. How's
Okay,
that?
nice. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this was very good. One way I kind of look at it when I'm getting like 4 stars and above, I view those movies as movies that I'm going to carry with me beyond this year.
Yeah.
Does
Okay.
that make sense? I'm gonna revisit these. I think they're really, really good. And then 3.5 star movies I like, but I kind of feel like in 3 months I'm gonna maybe forget that I watched them, or there's
Just
just a lot of
never.
good stuff that comes out. I might not revisit it.
Might not take the time really to watch it again down the road. But
Right.
4 stars, you probably will.
Yeah, that's kind of how I can definitely see myself rewatching this. I was actually a little disappointed that my parents watched it without me after I told them to. I thought like, oh, next time I see them, we'll just watch Apollo 10.5 and I'll get to watch it twice.
Yeah. No. Not so fast.
Yeah, but I love this. This is definitely one of my favorite movies of the year so far. It might be my favorite. I don't know. It's right there. There's kind of 2 or 3 that are right towards the
Wow.
top at the moment. But that was a very good Owen Wilson, by the way.
Thanks. I can't do it
Yeah.
again. I'm not like Adam. I can't just whip
Yeah, we
out these
can't just
amazing impressions.
yeah, that nobody else has ever known about.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of all I have. 4 stars from me, 3.5, or excuse me, 3
3
from
stars
Dylan.
from me. And this is proof that we don't always agree on everything, because so far the reviews since we made the jump to YouTube have been pretty similar, but
They have, which
this
isn't
is
always the way it goes, but
does
we've
not
had a
always
stretch
happen that
here
way.
where we've been like really in sync, in
Yeah.
lockstep for the first, for the last month or so.
Oh well, leave it to Linklater to throw us a curveball.
Yeah, I'll watch pretty much anything this guy makes, and I was very happy that I liked this movie as much as I did.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then that being said, is it my turn to put a wrap on the show?
I have a quote, unless you also do.
Oh, nope. Take it away. That'll be a teaser for next episode.
Yeah, tune back in if you want to hear Dylan's quote. George Washington, man, he was in a cult, and the cult was into aliens, man.